Today we're going to be starting Unit 6, which is all about expressions and equations. A lot of this material will be new and unheard of to you, so we're going to focus in on a little bit of vocab in today's lesson. Four very important vocab terms are term, variable, coefficient, and constant. A term is any part of an expression or equation. A variable is a letter or symbol that we use to represent an unknown value. A coefficient is a number that is attached to a variable. We need to know that a coefficient will multiply whatever the variable is. And finally, a constant is a number without a variable. In this example of an expression, we can see those four major vocab words. Okay, so we start using x's, y's, and letters to represent numbers we don't know. So in blue we have the variable x, and we can see that the 4 is the coefficient, the number with the variable. Okay, we've switched those together, but what's really happening is it's saying 4 times x. In pink you have your constant terms, which are those numbers. We call them constant because they can't change. Whereas, depending on the value of the variable x over here, this term can change. Then, less specifically, if I'm referring to terms in an expression or equation, that's any of the parts. Okay, so 4x is a term. Okay, those are bundled together. 7 is a term, and 5 is a term. Typically, you might be asked to count the total number of terms. So we would have 1, 2, 3 total terms. To start, we're just going to work with identifying these key vocabulary words. I encourage you as you're working to go back and forth between the problem you're working on and going back to the vocabulary slide to help you out. In this first example, I'm going to underline any of the variables. When I go to underline the variable, I just want the letter. So, for example, I'm not going to underline the 6. The y is the variable. Likewise, in the 8h, h is the variable, and 2g, g is the variable. Next, I'm going to circle the constant. Okay, so again, if we look back at the definition, a constant is a number that doesn't have a variable. Okay, so I'm going to skip 6 because it's connected to y. 43, and all the other numbers are connected to variables. The last thing I'm going to do is put a star above coefficients. Okay, one way to help you remember what a coefficient is, okay, co means together, so a coefficient means it's working together with the variable. Okay, so I'm only putting a star above the number, okay, so I'm not including the y because the coefficient is just a 6. The 8, and the 2. Moving on to the next example, in this one we're going to actually list them out, so really distinguish between those key terms. Okay, starting with terms, any part of the expression is considered a term, so I'm listing out all of the pieces. Okay, and I'll separate them by a comma. The next one is 18m. It has a plus sign in front of it. I don't need to include the plus sign. This will be an implied positive term. 5f is the same thing. Okay, but when I get to -2, when I'm referring to terms, it's important to carry the sign that's in front. So because I'm subtracting 2, I would say this is a -2. And likewise with the c, it has a minus sign in front, so it is negative. And we'll be able to sort these 5 different terms into their 3 different categories from here. Okay, starting with a constant, again, I'm looking for a number that doesn't have a variable. So 42, the first number has no letter attached, that's a constant. And the other one without a letter is the 2. And again, we're going to keep our sign in front, so it is a -2. Next we have our variables. Variable, you're just listing out the letter. Okay, so I see an M, an F, and a C. Okay, for each variable underneath that, I'm going to identify one coefficient. Okay, so the coefficient with the M is an 18. Looking at F, the number connected to the F is the 5. Okay, both of those are positive. And then C. When there isn't a number with the variable, there's an implied 1. So this is really saying minus 1C. So I would say the coefficient is minus 1. As we move through the unit, being able to distinguish between these is going to be really important, and understanding their meanings will help you complete tasks. The last thing we're going to cover today is using substitution. Okay, in using substitution, we really need to remember back to the definition of the coefficient. Okay, so when we look at a number that is attached to a variable, we have to remember that the coefficient multiplies that value. So when I go to evaluate the expression for m plus 9, okay, right now I don't know the value of m, but then I am told m equals 7. So I'm going to replace in the equation any m I see with a 7. Now we remember for the coefficient to m is multiplying it, so it doesn't become 47. Okay, we're going to have to do an extra step here. I like to put these in parentheses to help remember that, again, this is not 47, it's actually going to be 4 times 7. Okay, so I'll multiply that out. 4 times 7 is 28. Okay, and as you notice, as I'm moving down, I'm only doing one step in each row to make sure I'm not making silly mistakes. So lastly, I'll add 28 plus 9 and get 37. When you're asked to evaluate, you should be able to get down to a singular answer as long as you're told the value for the variable.